Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new episode of the Pole Position Podcast. Yeah, that's right, we are back for the start of the new season. It's fantastic to actually be back doing the actual podcast. This is absolutely amazing. Now you may know in this podcast that we are going to be just doing audio only for it. I thought I'd give it a try again, see what it's like. If people prefer actually having the video camera for the podcast as well, then that's actually fine. I'll bring that back, that's not a problem. But actually in terms of the podcast, I thought I would give it a go being audio only, and videos on the channel would obviously be used with the camera, but like I said, that can change in the future. But this is the first episode of the 2020 F1 season. We're going to be looking at obviously the preview of the Australian Grand Prix. I can't believe it's come around already. This is F1 week, this is the start of the season. Wednesday everybody will be unveiling sort of the cars. Melbourne will be going on. A lot of stuff always happens at Melbourne. Last first race of the season we saw last year, there was a big stage in the middle of the city, and obviously all the drivers were coming out, all the team bosses were coming out. Whether they're doing the same this year, I'm not too sure in terms of the Wednesday. But that'll be interesting to see, and obviously the hype we had last year, whether they're going to do the same sort of thing this year. Obviously Thursday again, we see a lot of media interviews from the drivers, from the teams. I know Renault will be showing off their new car livery on Wednesday as well. I wish it was be staying the same we saw in testing, if I'm honest, but you know that's what they're unveiling. They're unveiling a new car, and then obviously Friday practice begins. Now obviously me being in the UK, everything in terms of the Australian times, it is early in the morning, so if you wanted to watch qualifying, you wanted to watch the race, I think it's about 5-6 o'clock in the morning. Whether I'll be doing that or not is another thing, but I will really be watching the full race. I love watching the full race, so yeah, it'd be fantastic to actually see the F1 back. But this is, like I said, the first podcast of the year, going to be previewing the Australian Grand Prix, what my thoughts are in terms of the weekend just beginning, who I think is going to be doing well this weekend, and yeah, just some of the overall news topics that we've seen as well. So yeah, I mean, like I said, let's get into it and let's get down to the stuff. Now, the main thing that's happened in this last week, I would say, since obviously testing, that the last sort of 5 minutes of testing in the second test, we saw an announcement from the FIA that they sort of reached a settlement with Ferrari regarding the power unit last year, especially coming after the American Grand Prix. Obviously the FIA were testing the Ferrari power unit. Obviously they've seen irregularities with the actual power unit, but in terms of actual showing the evidence, they've decided to reach a settlement in-house with Ferrari, and obviously not to discuss anything more. Now obviously that has annoyed all the other teams on the grid that don't have their power units supplied by Ferrari. So obviously the teams like Haas and Alfa Romeo, they haven't really had any issues with it, of course. Why would they? They're Ferrari power units, they wouldn't say anything. But every other team on the grid put out a big statement. I'm guessing everybody's seen it. Sort of an angry response to it, saying, you know, we obviously want to know more information as to why there was an issue. What issue was there? Why was there irregularities in the power unit? Did that happen all season? All these questions, and obviously the FIA put out a statement the day after, sort of just glossing over everything and still saying it's being settled in-house, which is obviously again has annoyed the team. So I think a lot of the stuff going into this weekend will be revolved around sort of the Ferrari power unit settlement. I'm guessing Mattia Binotto is going to be asked a lot of questions about this going into the season. It's not really something, as a team boss, I'm guessing he's going to be really interested in, of course, because it's the start of the new season. He's going to be wanting to talk about the new year, obviously the drivers starting afresh with 0 points each. Obviously there's pressure on Sebastian Vettel, we know that's his last contract, but these are the sort of questions that he's probably going to be happy to talk about. This Ferrari settlement, yeah, I think, to be honest, it probably would have been easier just to have sort of give out the full honest truth about the situation and sort of moved on, whereas they've agreed this deal. FIA put out a statement and it's been absolutely blown out of the water, and of course it is still continuing now. So yeah, personally I just think it would have been easier to have admitted something, paid the fine or wherever it was, and just moved on really. But yeah, that's probably going to be a lot of the talk that's going to be happening on the grid, and obviously in the team principals interviews. I'm guessing the drivers for Ferrari are going to be asked about it. I'm guessing the Haas drivers are going to be asked about it. Everyone really, I expect, like Mercedes and that, are going to be asking questions about it, and the journalists are going to be asking Toto Wolff what he thinks of the situation. Now obviously, like I said, everyone's put out a joint statement, so I think they all know their feelings, but yeah, I mean, not great for Ferrari that this is what's going to be happening, but I mean, you know, obviously there was irregularities with the power unit last year. Otherwise, they wouldn't have agreed a settlement. They would have said there was no issues at all. So, yeah, I mean, I suppose they've just got to take it on the chin. Really, it's obviously something that they've done, and they've got to deal with that, I suppose. So, I mean, that's a main point that's going to be happening going into this weekend. In terms of actual Ferrari, a lot of people have been talking about whether they've actually been sandbagging or whether that's the actual pace. Of course, sandbagging means that they're not showing their true potential of the car's pace and their performance. Charles Leclerc did a few decent runs, Sebastian Vettel as well, but nothing to set the world alight. I think obviously Mercedes and Red Bull sort of dominated that. Even Robert Kubica and Kimi Raikkonen put in like fast lap times. So I think Ferrari are going to go into this weekend sort of everybody looking at them in the unknown, not too sure what's actually their true pace is. Are they ahead of Red Bull? Are they third place? Can Racing Point actually keep up with them? Are they closer to Racing Point than they are Red Bull and Mercedes? It's really up in the air as to where Ferrari are in terms of their pace. But again, that'll be interesting to see. Charles Leclerc and Sebastian Vettel as well. Who's going to come out on top in the first race? That will be interesting. I personally would like to see Sebastian Vettel have one last good year at Ferrari. Obviously with it being 1 year left on his contract, do we think he's going to get another one? There's obviously talks about Daniel Ricciardo taking his place. Big news, maybe Carlos Sainz taking the place as well. So there's a lot of talk about other drivers. So I think it would be good for Sebastian Vettel to have one last proper year at Ferrari. No mistakes. I mean, obviously we can't promise that. He's been full of mistakes the last couple of years. But it would be nice for him to have like a clean year, no issues. I think obviously if that happens, he'd probably get another deal at Ferrari. But maybe he might think it's sort of time to move on. Am I going to win at Ferrari? Am I going to win another drivers' championship at Ferrari? It's debatable, especially with Charles Leclerc signing a big bumper deal. I think you kind of know where their loyalties lie in terms of that Ferrari garage right now. But you never know. I mean, like I said, I quite like Sebastian Vettel to start the season well. Hopefully that boosts his confidence and becomes better. That's not to say I hope Charles Leclerc doesn't, because obviously I want to see Charles Leclerc, the likes of Charles Leclerc, Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, Sebastian Vettel. I want them all fighting at the top. I want to see it. I don't want to be greedy, but I want to see them all fighting at the top. Alex Albon as well. I think this is a good year for him to start off now. So I obviously want to see all that happening. But if I had to pick a driver I'd like to see do well the most in terms of the Scuderia team, it would be Sebastian Vettel in sort of what is like almost his swan songs of his F1 career. It's just sort of coming to an end sort of thing when you look at the likes of the really young drivers that are coming through. So yeah, that's more in what's going to be happening really at Ferrari. Obviously there's loads of talk going around the world at the minute about the global health situation, obviously due to the coronavirus outbreak. Now, news that came out earlier, sort of over the weekend to be fair, was the fact that the Bahrain Grand Prix will be held behind closed doors. There'll be no spectators at the Bahrain Grand Prix. I think the first time in history an F1 event's been held without any spectators or supporters that are going to be at the race. So that's going to be really weird actually, because I'm not too sure what I think about that. I mean, obviously Bahrain's not the most popular event in terms of, I think it's more like corporate people that go to the event at Bahrain. I think if it had been like the Spanish Grand Prix or like the Netherlands Grand Prix that's coming this year, the British Grand Prix, then I think there would have been more of an uproar than there has been. But I still think it would be weird to have a F1 Grand Prix without any spectators there. I think obviously it's a spectator sport. People want to see it. As I just take a drink, sorry. Spectators obviously want to see it. It's going to be really weird, actually. I think, obviously, if it was still the back in the day with the really loud engines, then it would just be echoing around the circuit and the empty grandstands. But, we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, like I said, no spectators. Will be just a televised event. I think it'd be weird for the drivers as well. They're going up on the podium to celebrate, but it's literally only the teams watching. There's no fans in the in the grandstands. Nobody there. I mean, there might be some in terms of the paddock club, but I'm not even sure about that actually. It might literally just be the team. So yeah, that's going to be weird to see. Obviously, we know the Chinese Grand Prix has already been postponed due to the outbreak, but racing's going ahead as planned in Australia. There's been no issues. I think all the teams have sort of left to head to the Australian Grand Prix in Melbourne without any issues at all, but Bahrain, the second race of the year, is set to be behind closed doors. Haven't heard anything about Vietnam at the minute. I think that's all going ahead as well, which is the third race of the year, so I don't think there's any issues with that. But obviously trying to get everything to the Grand Prix is going to be quite difficult with this sort of issue that's going on around the world. But yeah, hopefully it's not going to affect us all watching the Grand Prix. So yeah, hopefully everything gets sorted in terms of that. Other news points, obviously in testing, Mercedes again were dominant in terms of the testing this year. A lot of talk obviously about their DAS system, which is the dual axis steering system. Obviously this is the first time we're going to see it at an F1 Grand Prix weekend at Melbourne. So yeah, will we see a lot of happening in terms of this system? Will we be seeing a lot in terms of what the drivers are doing with it, or is it just sort of, I don't want to say a gimmick, but are we just going to see it once or twice a year, depending on what the track is and how maybe altitude wise the track is. We're probably not going to see it at every race, but this is the first time in an actual season that we're going to see it, the first race of the year. Are that Valtteri Bottas and Lewis Hamilton going to be using it a lot, or are they going to be keeping it a bit more close to the chest, only using it when it's majorly needed? I think it's a quirky idea. Obviously, it's only around for the 2020 season. It's already sort of been banned, as you'd say. You can't really use that technology for the 2021 season with the regulation changes. So I think other teams, I think it's a bit pointless to sort of invest in that sort of stuff now when you've got them huge regulation changes coming in 2021. Why waste resources on this system? We don't even know if it's going to properly work. We sort of saw it and everybody's gone, wow, this is amazing, but is it really going to really help the team as Mercedes this year? We'll have to sort of wait and see, but I think everybody else will, just have to deal with the fact that they don't have it. I think obviously Ferrari, Sebastian Vettel was talking about it and saying, during testing, that it's sort of a quirky idea, but whether or not it actually works full time or not, we don't know that yet. So I think obviously when it comes to practice, the practice sessions and if they're still working it then, and then obviously when qualifying comes around, obviously the fastest day of the weekend, qualifying, putting their best laps in, will they be using it then? So yeah, it is going to be interesting to see how much they do actually use the system. I think when it comes to higher altitude circuits, and obviously we're going to see it a lot more. But yeah, it's going to be weird to sort of see that happening on the onboards. I expect to see a lot more onboard shots during TV coverage now of the Mercedes, which obviously isn't a bad thing. I do like the onboard shots, but I expect with this new system they're going to be using a lot more onboards for the Mercedes team this year. But hey, that's a good shot. I quite like it. So yeah, let's hope it continues. And obviously, if it does help Mercedes, then that's a huge advantage for them going into this year. Also, in terms of actual going back to testing, we saw a lot of pace from a few teams. I'm just going to name a few. Obviously now, Mercedes, of course, looked good, looked fast, but they have had reliability issues, and that is something going into this year they are a little bit worried about. I mean, James Allison saying they are a little bit worried about Mercedes' reliability this year. Are they just throwing us a ball? Is this actually legit? Are they being real about this, or are they just sort of again putting their cards close to their chest, saying, oh well, we're not going to be as reliable this year, and then they go out and they don't break down in the first 10 races. That's sort of the Mercedes way of going about it. I think they had hardly had any mechanical issues last year. I think the only one I can really remember from Valtteri Bottas' side was the one in Brazil when he had to pull over. I can't really think of many others, apart from obviously they crashed in Germany. But that was sort of issues from both drivers. I think both of them were having a bad day in terms of that. But yeah, I think reliability probably won't be a factor for Mercedes, and if it is going to be as bad, then it's probably not going to be as bad as other teams already have it now. I mean, if Mercedes are like, oh my god, my reliability is going to be terrible, we're going to break down 2 times out of the 22 races this year. I mean, oh my goodness me, So I think in terms of Mercedes, I don't think there's anything much to worry about. Red Bull impressed me during the test. I think Honda's power unit looks good. I think the way they've balanced the car between aerodynamic and sort of outright performance and power looks really good. Really impressed. Did have a few spins in testing, but obviously that might be the fact that they're getting used to a faster car. Who knows? Max Verstappen was sort of giving it everything during testing, so that's looking good as well. Obviously, like I said, we don't know Ferrari's pace for this year, so that'll be interesting to see where they are. And Racing Point, obviously a lot of talk about Racing Point. Not going to use the 2 words that people have been using throughout the whole of testing, but they look really good. They've took a design, they look fast, and it's the last time we're going to see the Pink Panther, with obviously Aston Martin taking control next year. It'll probably be more British Racing Green, so it's the last time we're going to see a pink Formula 1 car in a long time. So who knows? I mean, it looks fast. Could they get a few podiums this year? Obviously, both drivers have had podiums in the past. Lance Stroll has had one in Baku, and obviously Sergio Perez has had podiums, quite a few podiums with sort of Force India in the past. Did he have one for Sauber as well? I think he had one for Sauber. So they've definitely got potential in terms of that. I think obviously this is a make or break season for Lance Stroll, really. I know his dad owns Racing Point, so he's probably always going to have a seat when his dad's around. But in terms of actually his dad having to prove or show that actually his kid is good enough to race in that car when there's other drivers around, it's sort of Lance Stroll's got to say, right, I've got a good car this year, I really have to improve. And I think more to the point, his qualifying has to really improve as well. I think his race starts are really good. I'm not the biggest fan of Lance Stroll, but I've got to give credit to his race starts. They're always good, but his race starts would be even better if he qualified higher up the grid. He's having great race starts because he's going from like 18th to 11th, but can you imagine if he was actually starting around the 11th place? I mean, he could fire up higher on the grid. So that's definitely something they've got to work on this year. But in terms of the actual Racing Point car, it's looking really good this year. So I'm really looking forward to seeing where they are in terms of performance. Then you've obviously got other teams like McLaren and Renault. Like I said, Renault will be unveiling their other livery on Wednesday afternoon at the circuit at Albert Park. Obviously, I'm a little bit gutted because I think the special black livery that they put out during testing actually looks a lot better than what their car looked like last year. Obviously going to see a lot more yellow. That's not really a good thing in my opinion. I think the car for testing looked amazing. Please let me know in the comments if you preferred the testing livery to last year's. I mean, hey, there might be only a little bit extra yellow in this new car, but I still think the testing car would have been a lot better to go with for the season. Obviously, you've got Esteban Ocon and Daniel Ricciardo this year as well, a new dynamic. Both drivers in the past have had issues with team rivalries. You've obviously had Daniel Ricciardo and Max Verstappen, and of course Esteban Ocon and Sergio Perez when they were at Force India or Racing Point. So yeah, that'll be interesting to see how their sort of relationship starts in the first few races of the season, and whether they may clash during the races. I think Renault have really got to pick up this year. I think obviously losing out 4th place to McLaren was pretty gutting, I think, for their team. So I think they really have to perform this year, and it would be nice to see like an actual battle between McLaren and Renault for that spot, with obviously the other teams battling around them as well. But to see like McLaren and Renault actually fighting for that 4th place would be really, really good. And of course, like I said, Racing Point are in there as well. We don't know where they are in terms of actual performance, so where they are sort of determines where McLaren and Renault are going to end up. In terms of McLaren, obviously this is their last year with the Renault power unit. How's that going to fare? Obviously they're going to go to a Mercedes next year. Is that going to help them more with a Mercedes power unit, depending on what the reliability for is for Mercedes this year? That would be really interesting, because obviously Zach Brown will be like, oh my god, we're going to that power unit this year and look how many reliability issues they're having. Like I said, I think that's going to be sort of overplayed in terms of their reliability. I think it's going to be fine. There's going to be no problems with that really that I see. In terms of McLaren, Obviously, another year, second full year again with the same teammates of Lando Norris and Carlos Sainz. Really impressed me last year. Obviously, a lot talked about them in terms of the documentaries and all the YouTube videos. Always seem to have the McLaren guys in there. They're a great pair to have. Really impressed as well on track. Carlos Sainz especially did really well in his first full year at McLaren, and of course Lando Norris with his first full season at McLaren as well. So really looking forward to seeing both of them. Obviously, if you don't know already, I am a McLaren fan, so is there a possibility of them getting more podiums this year? I mean, of course, I know Carlos Sainz got a podium in Brazil, sort of had to wait for it though, but it'd be nice to see them more fighting a bit more for every race to try and get on that podium. That would be really good to see, and finally seeing sort of McLaren getting back on that top step of the podium. Please, could it be this year that we see McLaren on the top step? That would be absolutely incredible, especially considering where they've sort of come from in the last few years. Also, another point to make in terms of Australia, Valtteri Bottas. Now, obviously, Valtteri Bottas absolutely dominated last year in the 2019 race at Australia. Put out that message to whom it may concern, to all the sort of the doubters and the haters from last year, and obviously they called him the prospect of Valtteri Bottas 2.0 was what happened last year. Obviously 2.0 did okay in the first part, but sort of faded away once again, fighting Lewis Hamilton for the championship. Obviously lost out to Lewis Hamilton in Austin in the US Grand Prix last year. So is it Bottas 3.0 this year? Are we going to see another improved Bottas for this year? I really hope so. I really, really, really want to see a Mercedes driver competing with Lewis Hamilton. I want to see both drivers giving it everything in a car that we know can win the Drivers' Championship. Obviously, it wins the Constructors' Championship 6 years in a row as well, so we know it's got a car, and I just really want to see Valtteri Bottas wringing the neck off that car in every single race. Obviously, we do see him fade away a lot, and that's obviously not what I want to see. I like Valtteri Bottas. I think he's a great personality, sort of says it how it is in terms of the finishing him, just says it straight to the point. Really think he has got the potential to obviously win the Drivers' Championship. He's got a great car. Obviously, he's got a teammate like Lewis Hamilton, which is always going to throw you like a curveball. It's always going to be an issue having Lewis Hamilton as your teammate. But I think you've got to sort of rise to that challenge. And obviously, he has done more in the 2019 season than he did previously, but he has to do it even more this year. Especially with Esteban Ocon obviously going to Renault. I'm not sure if that's a 1 year or a 2 year deal, but even not looking at Esteban Ocon, you look at George Russell. I think he obviously really shone last year, which was considerably hard to do in a Williams. But I think people weren't looking at sort of where he was finishing, but the performances he was putting in the car that was deservedly back of the grid. So I think obviously Bottas has to improve. He's still on a 1 year rolling deal. He said during testing that he obviously that keeps affecting him, that he's always on a 1 year deal, and obviously he knows that, being in the world of Formula One, there's always other drivers that want your seat. But I think obviously he had to wait until August last year, so sort of during the summer break, to find out if he was staying in the team. And obviously this year he said he wants to find out a little bit earlier, but of course you've got to put in the performances to immediately warrant the contract talks happening. So yeah, Bottas has sort of really got to perform this year. Do I think he will? I'd like to think so. I think if we can, obviously, we're all talking about Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton, but if we can throw, like I said, Sebastian Vettel in the mix again, and Valtteri Bottas in there as well, I mean, what a hell of a season we've got there as sort of a prospect. I actually think Valtteri Bottas will once again win the Australian Grand Prix. I think he's sort of going in as the underdog, even though he won it last year. Like I said, other people will be talking about the Red Bull power in Max Verstappen. A lot of talk will be about Ferrari, of course, and obviously Lewis Hamilton being the sort of the Drivers' Championship again. I think this would be another opportunity for Valtteri Bottas to sort of go under the radar and get that first win, get that confidence, and sort of start the season again well, but sort of may that continue throughout the whole season. So I think Valtteri Bottas will win the Australian Grand Prix. That's my prediction that I'm going for to win the race. In terms of coming second, I actually think Max Verstappen will come second. I think that Red Bull will be super quick around Albert Park circuit. And in terms of who I think will be going third, I think Lewis Hamilton will come third. I think obviously the Ferraris, I think they'll be quicker than we all think they're going to be, but I see a few teething problems with the team, whether that be a pit stop or having issues in another way, maybe the poor qualifying performance. I'm not sure, but I don't see a Ferrari driver winning the Grand Prix, should I say. So I think in terms of the actual order, I think, like I said, Valtteri Bottas will win the Australian Grand Prix. Max Verstappen will come second, and Lewis Hamilton will come third. Please let me know who you think is going to win the Australian Grand Prix, who you think is going to be the top three that are going to stand on the podium. Where do we think in terms of the practice sessions as well? Where do you think your favourite team is? Obviously, like I said, in terms of my favourite team being McLaren, I see them being definitely fighting for fourth this year alongside Renault. I think obviously Alfa Romeo are looking good as well. Alfa Tauri, Haas as well, I think have really improved since last year. I think they've needed to. Obviously seeing Gunther Steiner on that F1 Drive to Survive documentary was amazing. More Gunther Steiner please, that was fantastic. And I think Williams have made improvements. I think Williams look good. Obviously, the fact that they were the first car to go out in testing as well, I think said a lot to where they obviously were 12 months previously, when they didn't even start for the first two tests. I think they've made great strides. So I think they're still going to be back of the grid, but if they can fight alongside maybe a couple of the other teams during the season, that would be fantastic as well. So yeah, please let me know what your thoughts are. Heading into this first race of the season. It's back. The F1 is back. It's absolutely fantastic. I cannot wait to sort of finish the week and enjoy the weekend of motorsport that's going to be happening. Please let me know, again, your thoughts, what you think, and of course, again, like I said at the beginning of the video, do you like the fact that this is an audio podcast only, or would you like me to do the podcast via video as well? Please let me know that. But yeah, thank you very much for listening to the first podcast, the first pole position podcast of the 2020 F1 season, and I look forward to doing more of these throughout the year. Yeah, enjoy the Australian Grand Prix, everyone. I can't wait.